I like to keep things. Oh, now it's quiet as it should be. Now they're talking.
Perfect.
There's a lot of shit. There we go.
Am I hearing myself? No.
No, you're just hearing voices.
Just the usual voices in my head.
Just the usual.
Just the standard stuff.
That's all right. I've heard.
Okay, perfect.
I've heard it's only the anomalous voices you need to be worried about.
The anomalous voices.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're hearing, like if you're smelling normal smells, you're smelling, I don't know, wood, table, flowers, trees. That's fine. Toast, when there isn't toast, that's when it's bad, right?
Right.
You smell toast, you're having a stroke.
Okay.
Classically.
You know, I actually smell toast a lot. Like a lot of times when I smell something.
Okay.
What is toast? It's like a burnt smell. That happens all the time, right? Like, you know, and in San Francisco, people burn things on the street every day.
People do. Yeah. Torch your car here and there. No, it's actually Maillard's reaction that you get most of the smell off, not the particulate. The particulate's that like campfirey smell. Maillard's reaction is like what you're browning sugars and proteins and things like that. It's that browning caramelization effect. And I know about this actually because we did some R&D back in the day on a super advanced toaster. And so the chemistry of toast is something I have at least touched on a little bit.
Okay, I have a big question for you then. I've always wondered, people building consumer products, do they like optimize the hell out of doing a particular thing? Or do they optimize the hell out of the price? Like, you know, do they actually understand the craft, right? Because I think a lot of people would say they don't understand the craft, they just understand manufacturing, right?
Yeah. I think it varies. I think you see it varies based on the product, right? Like I would say, I don't know, Apple's the quintessential example of they know their product and they know like, the customer and they're making the thing and they don't care if the world thinks they're insane. They'll make it happen and they'll invent the technology to do that. And also like the machining centers is just insane. Like snap of the finger capital to go buy a couple of hundred CNC machines to just like make everything out of block aluminium. On the other hand, you want to look at like price optimized. What did I say the other day? Oh, so we've spoken about the 8 sleep before. Right?
That's right. I love my 8 sleep.
Love your 8 sleep. Shout out 8 sleep. But I was like, I don't know if I want to drop $2,500 on a mattress topper. Yeah. And, you know, on one hand, I've heard raving positive reviews from everyone who has one. On the other, it's a bunch of money, and then they still get you with the subscription service.
Yeah.
I hate the subscription. And so I was having a look. I was just trawling the internet. It's like, that has to be cheaper. Like this is compressor coolers. This is in every refrigerator ever. And a mattress topper, like, come on, it's a bloody water bed or just a camp bed with some water through it. How hard can it be? And the answer is $250 manufacturing optimized hard.
Really?
Mattress-cooler.com will sell you what is, at least in hardware, practically speaking, an 8 sleep. Compressor cooler with a coolant loop and a mattress topper that has, well, it'll make your bed 10 to 20 degrees cooler on the mattress. Than ambient.
Wow. But I mean, I guess like, I wonder if it's the cooling isn't like the main thing with 8 sleep. I'm not sure because it also does like heart rate and then the temperature control, like maybe controlling that temperature is really hard or something like that.
Yeah. So now you're talking about manufacturing optimization versus making a great product.
I see what you're saying.
Exactly.
I see what you're saying.
Exactly.
You fooled me into understanding the hypothesis. Yes. So basically, just because something is easy to manufacture kind of generically, it doesn't mean it's going to make a great product.
Doesn't mean it's going to be anywhere near as good.
Yeah, the little details basically matter.
They matter if you've got the cash for it.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm probably still not going to drop $2,500 on an 8 sleep, but I probably will buy something analogous for $250 and spend another $2,250 fucking round on it to try build my own 8 sleep because that's, we're nerds and it looks like a fun project, but that's a story for another day.
Yep. Absolutely. And you know a lot about compressors, so it kind of makes sense. It's in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. Hopefully this one doesn't require too much control. I'm just planning on turning it on and off on like a, minute type time scale. And
so for context, and I don't know how long you've been back from Europe, but it's been extremely hot in San Francisco like the past 4 days.
Oh my God.
Unbearable.
To like illustrate this point for people who might not have been here, and like, I'm Australian, it's pretty hot back home, but typically we have air conditioning because it's pretty hot back home.
Right.
And the houses are built for it. The houses here are big chimneys and you suck all the heat up to the top floor and trap it there because in winter that's what you want.
Yep.
But in summer, it was about 30 degrees Celsius, which is 80 in gibberish, I guess, roughly speaking.
Gibberish.
Not last night, the night before. I woke up in the morning with a melted chocolate bar, still melted beside my bed.
Really?
It was still melted in the morning.
Oh, so it's really getting up there, even if the outside temperature is somewhat lower. Like, yeah, because people from Texas or whatever, they're like, 90 degrees.
It's not that hot.
It's not that hot.
Yeah.
But it feels hotter in San Francisco. And I think that trapping on the top floor, I live on the top floor.
Yeah.
I've noticed that like right when I'm gonna go to bed is the most uncomfortable time of day on a hot day, because like for some reason it's just super hot.
It's so hot.
It makes no sense to me.
It's because the building's been soaking up this heat. It accumulates the heat, and then all the heat rises. Everyone knows heat rises, right? But there's some tricks you can actually do to fix this problem if you live on the top floor. So one, you know heat rises, and actually this is how a chimney works. It actually will stoke a fire for you, because all the heat rising out will suck fresh air in right, to a fireplace. And this is how all sorts of like the rocket stoves and whatnot work, right? And so if you use this effect and you find the tallest place in your house and you open it, the window there, open all the doors way through to the bottom floor, and then prop the bottom floor's door open, it will just suck cold air in from the bottom.
Really?
Yeah, I did this last night. And I was just standing in front of it, and it feels like you're standing in front of a hairdryer. Like the hot air is rushing past you.
Wow, that's crazy. I really need to talk to my downstairs neighbors. We need to work out an agreement.
Yeah. Well, you don't actually need them, because it's better for you to have a taller hot stack. And so you want just bottom to top, and it will just rip the cold air from the bottom out, and then it'll cool the whole building for your neighbors as well. So you're just doing them a favor.
Wow. That's so interesting. I do feel that way when I run an AC unit, is that all that cold air is just going down to them. You know what I mean?
You're really one for the neighbors, In actually, so I've just spent, as you mentioned, I've been in Europe the last 3 weeks, bringing up a new team member. Great to have him aboard. So excited to bring him in as a partner. And in Rotterdam, in his apartment, they have, central hot water heating for the city, which is not something I'm familiar with, but I think it's pretty common in the US as well. And you pay, I think you're saying it's like 90 euros a month for the connection, right? And then you pay per joule. And his heating bill is obscene. I can't remember precisely what it was, but it was on the order of like thousands of dollars a year.
Whoa.
Right?
Wow.
Nuts. And but the way they split costs is interesting. They say 75% of the cost of the total joules goes to you and 25% to the building, because exactly this. The people people sharing walls with one another actually help each other out, and the heat radiates around.
Oh,
and
wow.
So they don't want to discourage, or they want to encourage communal behavior of sharing this,
Wow, huh. Is that like a thing, like just geopolitical? Are all the energy prices high in Europe right now, or is that like specific to Rotterdam or?
No, so... And I don't know deeply about this, but the way it was explained to me was that at the start of the war in Ukraine, the gas prices shot up. And the way the laws are set up in Rotterdam, and as far as I understand it, also a lot of other cities, like PG&E here, the company, the heating company is like a regulated monopoly. And so the government basically says, you're a private company because we want you to operate efficiently, however that actually turns out. And that's all good and well, but in order to keep your price tractable for you to make a profit, we'll peg it to something that is one of your biggest cost functions, which they decided was the price of gas. But since they did this, the companies, wisely enough and correctly so, have started scavenging heat from all sorts of industrial processes. Rotterdam is the biggest port in Europe. It's one of the top 10 biggest ports in the world. And so they've got oil refineries, industrial processes for, whatever, chemicals and bulk grain and all sorts of stuff. And so they scavenge waste heat from those to heat buildings. It's fantastic, right? Recycling of heat. But that means that it's no longer true that the gas price and the actual cost to produce that heat are so tied together.
Oh.
And so they're still charging 3 times as much as it was before when they set this scheme up and everything seemed reasonable. But it's kind of unreasonable.
So it's kind of like your classic regulation is a little bit slow to fix the pricing.
Yeah, pretty classically. Too slow to fix anything, really. You wanted to qualify it maybe too much.
Very true, very true. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Any other interesting insights from your trip to Europe? You know,
Ooh,
what'd you do while you were there? I'm curious if you could share.
Worked a lot. Worked a lot. Well, I spent most of my time in the Netherlands, and I'm half Dutch. I've got 2 Dutch grandparents, and so I was running around like a headless chook the whole time, which I loved. You know, I like being busy. But I got to spend a day back in Munich, where I used to live. I lived there for almost 2 years. And I caught up with a couple of friends that I haven't seen in years.
Nice.
Fantastic. I finally made it to Oktoberfest for one day, the opening day, because the 2 years that I was there were during the pandemic, and so it didn't run.
Oh, wow.
And so I got to see the whole kit and caboodle and how the whole thing ran. Ate nothing but meat and potatoes for like 3 days. So, you know.
What else do you need?
What else? It actually turns out vegetables. You know, I am actually so glad to be back and pounding salad. Oh my God. Like, not just salad, but oh my God, thank God.
Potato isn't a vegetable? Okay, Matt. All right. Let's not get too controversial. Jeez.
Not trying to offend anyone here. And then,
potato.
you know, come back to my family reunion. You know, my great grandparents, my great grandparents sort of tree of the family. So lots of fun like that. But takeaways wise, it's true they cycle almost everywhere.
Yeah, I love the Netherlands. It's crazy how much infrastructure. Like you can bike into the airport and just bike around the airports. It's crazy how much infrastructure they have for bikes. I love it.
It's crazy how much infrastructure they have. Period.
Yeah.
Right? Like you think of this as being, so the Netherlands invented modern companies, practically speaking, and modern stock trading, partial stocks, all that type of stuff.
First company was a ship, right? It was like went out on a journey. And I always like to think about that. I'm actually like really inspired by that because the company was dissolved at the end of the voyage, right? It would like go there and come back. And then the stocks of the company were like, you know, percentages of what the ship brought back. And I've always loved like that kind of thing because the company is setting out to do one very ambitious thing and bring back returns. And that's kind of it. And it's kind of this like closed or like it's more like you achieve the vision and it has a goal point. Whereas nowadays companies kind of go on forever and you know, the goal point becomes unclear. We were talking about Tesla forever ago.
Yeah.
The shifting goal point kind of confusing.
It is confusing. And it's it leads to this like want to live forever, almost cantankerous old grumpy company that just wants to get the kids off its lawn. AT&T. So you're right. It's interesting. But because they've because it was between them and the Brits inventing these companies in the first place, right? But the Dutch invented partial stocks. They had the first bubble, being the famous tulip bubble back in, I think it was the late 1600s. It might have been the 1700s, right? Where tulips were going for today's equivalent of, I think it was tens of thousands of US dollars for a single bulb tulip.
Whoa.
Just because people thought they could sell it for more later. Until someone walked into the market one day and goes, what are we doing?
The original crypto.
Yeah, this is stupid. And stop. And then everyone else was like, oh my God, this is stupid. Like,
wow. So tulips were the original, I don't know what you would call it, because it's not crypto. Crypto didn't invent this phenomenon of like having bag holders, just bubbles.
Yeah, where you too far separate the value of something iconic from, you know, or just purely just detached iconography,
right?
And you say this thing is worth this, and it's true as long as everyone believes it. But if it's too detached and doesn't really have something to back it up,
that's so interesting. It makes a lot of sense to me now too, because there are so many. I went to the Tulip Festival in the Netherlands, and I remember there were so many types of tulips and like different classifications and stuff. And I was like, who's doing this? You know what I mean? They spent all this time like breeding different tulips by like mixing and whatever. And I'm like, why are people doing this? And there was a market for it, you know?
Yeah.
Show me the incentive.
Yeah, right. And I mean, there still is a market for it, right? Just they're now like not even $3 each, $3
a little bit more,
a little more reasonable
for the everyday man.
Yeah. Thank God. Tulips to the people. Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
But in terms of their infrastructure, right? Like out of this era and the fundamentals of that country and a lot of Europe, it was hard there. They had to make all of their land. Amsterdam's a couple of meters below sea level.
Right.
And so there's a lot of infrastructure you don't really notice. All of the water infrastructure, the dikes, the canals, like their foundations are infrastructure. The land is basically infrastructure to them. Their
Right.
roads are fantastic. Their drainage is second to none. Yanni has, I think it was 10 gigabit internet in his apartment. Yeah. And their port, like the Rotterdam port, is the biggest in Europe and one of the biggest in the world.
Yep.
It is a really truly built environment.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I can't remember the stat, but like Netherlands is called the Netherlands because it was like underwater, and they have lifted it out of water. Like it's some crazy percentage of land that they've just lifted out of water through really, really good irrigation and planning and stuff like that. So
Lots of windmills.
yeah, lots of windmills.
But that goes into their bike infrastructure as well. Like they invest, right?
Yeah.
Like you can cycle everywhere, like you're saying.
Absolutely, city to city.
City to city, intercity.
Yeah.
And the other thing is actually it's not so well known that the Dutch haven't been cycling sort of forever, right? Back in it was the 70s. It really looked like any American city. Like there are multi-lane roads down the middle of Amsterdam. Really, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Even with the canals and everything, so you've got like
Yep, on the
Wow.
sides of the canals, and not necessarily the absolute dead center where it was a bit too tight, but just out. I mean, we're talking like a block across, like really not far because it's such a tiny city. You can walk across it,
Right,
20 minutes or
right.
something. And so it's been a 50-year concerted effort by basically the bicycle lobby, of cyclists, not the selling bicycles. They're not that
Right.
lucrative. Trek, we're out watching you. Who made it the cycling sort of heaven that it is today.
Yeah.
Which I thought was so interesting because honestly, the weather kind of stinks. It's raining a lot, and everyone has still decided that cycling is the way to go, even when it's a bit cold and wet outside.
Yeah,
Here
yeah.
we've got it easy.
Yeah. I guess that keeps the population healthy a little bit too. I wonder if there's any stats on that, but I don't remember seeing particular. The only thing I remember about the people is extremely tall, very tall in Netherlands. I'm like 6'2". I'm like a kind of tall person here, but in the Netherlands, I didn't feel that way.
Just feel normal for once.
Yeah, but a lot happened while you were away, Matt.
Yep. Give me a rundown.
I mean, let's see. What happened? All I remember right now off the top of my head is this Pear AI YC craziness.
Pear AI.
Yeah.
What? Tell me.
So Pear AI got into YC.
Oh, like PEAR, not PAIR.
Yeah, PEAR.
Like the fruit.
The fruit. Yeah,
okay.
exactly. So they get into YC, and then they do their YC announcement post, and they're like, hey, we got into YC. We're trying to build like the future of AI editing. And then they get community noted, and it says they're a fork of Continue, which is a YC company from 2 years ago. Yeah. They kind of disclosed this in a couple places, but they weren't, I guess, super upfront about it.
Yep.
And they were basically just a rebrand, and people didn't like that.
Yep.
And so it got pretty chaotic. Continue issued a statement that was like, hey, we think they should start over. And then YC was like, yeah, we want them to do things. And yeah, it was a whole saga. Apologies all around.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
my. Okay. I saw, I think, one meme about this, which was someone like, I just started, what was it, Octopus AI or something, and I'm a fork of
That's right.
XYZAB. Andreessen, if you want to give me $3 billion,
Yep. Somebody made a fork of Pear called Blueberry AI, and they just replaced the word pear everywhere with blueberry. And
Did they get into YC?
I don't think they got into YC, but you don't know. Next batch, right? There's always next batch.
There's a full batch now. That's a new thing.
A full batch, meaning
A full batch. So historically,
that's
YC's
right.
only ever
Yeah.
run 2 batches, winter and summer. And they have for the first time introduced an autumn batch,
That's right.
which
That's
they
right.
don't call it because but Americans.
Oh yeah, we don't really have.
Yeah.
Wait, is autumn? Wait.
Autumn is the fall.
Oh, but that exists everywhere, right?
Autumn. Oh yeah. But I mean, so not only is the whole year flipped around in the southern hemisphere, right? But I also don't call it fall. And so when kids are going to university or whatever, or my my girlfriend was explaining her college fall XYZ. I have to do the maths, and I think fall at home is in this month, and then you flip it around, and then it's here. So anyway.
Oh, I see.
I haven't bothered to readjust that one.
You know, when I don't know if other people think this way, but when I think of autumn, I think of beautiful browning leaves. And when I think of fall, I think of dead trees.
I think of tripping over.
The coming of winter.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you do in your
It's just what's most common. But jumping back to Pear for a second, I thought this was really interesting for us.
Yes.
And Continue, the company that got forked or rebranded, they're a permissive Apache 2 project.
Okay.
And so it split Twitter briefly. People were like, look, Apache 2 project, of course you're supposed to fork that. That's the whole point of Apache 2. And then on the other side, and I'm a little bit on this side, there's a little bit more to open source than just the license.
Of course.
Just rebranding or something like that. Like licenses get you like 80% of they kind of, in my view, licenses are more for your customers, more or less, right? It's to not scare away people. It's to be inviting to commercial people.
Yeah, and companies might fork and tweak something internally, and you're like, cool, we'd love you to modify it.
Go nuts. Yeah. Go nuts. But then it's not to hurt the original project, which you do with rebranding or some, generally if you compete with the original project on distribution. So I sent out this tweet, and I'm curious what your take would be on this.
Go for it.
I was like, if somebody forked tscircuit, which is MIT, and just rebranded it and then got into YC, I would start closing repos. I would keep like the core open, but we definitely wouldn't be open sourcing stuff like our website or other things that would be very easy to rebrand or
reskin
or take.
and take in your
like
image.
Our playground or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what your take is on that, because this is always a threat for permissively licensed projects.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. We're Apache 2 and MIT, depending on the repo. And it feels like one of those things of, you make your decision and at some point someone's going to do it. And you're kind of accepting that in the open source world, and you're really betting on yourself, your team, and your community to outcompete the fork. That's really what you're saying. And that's what you're saying to customers too. You're saying, we're serious, and we're serious about this so long term that if we don't do it, someone else will, basically.
That's right.
And so you're going to have support one way or the other, even if it comes from your own team.
That's right. That's right. Like, that's the thing with, that's so well said. That's the thing with permissive licenses is if you become the market leader, if you are given, what did they say, the mantle or whatever, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
If you're holding the torch, you get the torch, but somebody might take that torch, but you get the torch while you have it, right? And and everybody's going to trust you, you know?
It kind of comes back to, as you're saying, the ship goes out and it comes back in and then the company's over.
Right.
Now, things are less extreme these days, but perhaps in some way, open source software is a recognition that maybe companies shouldn't last for 400 years.
Right.
100 years. Like, what American companies are currently 100 years old? Can you think of it?
Well, the first that come to mind are IBM.
They're 100 years old.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, wait. Now I feel like I need to check, but IBM is very old.
IBM started off with a what was it? It was
113.
It was 113.
113.
They started off with census counting equipment, wasn't it?
It beats me. International business machines. Is that it?
Yeah. I thought the seed. Okay, I could be completely misremembering this, but I thought the seed of IBM was originally counting census data from back in the day when the US ran an early nationwide census.
Sounds right.
And so this is obviously pre-digital computer or electronic computer. Anyway, I thought they were doing this with basically a mechanical counting computer.
The only old thing I remember IBM doing is, and I don't want to get this fact wrong, but I remember they worked with Germany during one of the world wars on some numbering machines for prisoners, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
That's like the only thing I remember.
Oh, God. You collude with them once, and then forever on afterwards. What's the clothing brand that they? There's like a very famous German clothing. They made all of the SS's brand, but we still wear
There's
them today.
Adidas. Adidas is German. I think.
Yeah, there's a few of them. Some of the big chemical companies in Germany still, I think it's that is.
Oh, that's a little scary.
Yeah, it's very scary. I mean, it's obviously completely different people, leadership, whatever.
Right. Everything has changed, and people have,
But they evolved from.
America, I'm told, at the beginning of the World Wars was also, there were many, it wasn't completely decisive where people would stand. So, not all the information was out there.
Yeah.
But jumping back to open source licenses.
Yeah, thank God.
I think that's a key point is like, if you're building the foundation for the future, you probably will not be the best forever. There is no company ever that has been the best forever.
No.
So, making it open is just a way of making sure that if people build on this, they are not building into you specifically, even though they're happy to help you while you are number one.
When do you think a company should die?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think it's almost like it might have something to do with, it's a really good question. I don't think you can put a number on it.
Maybe we can look at some examples and we can back examine it from, should AT&T still be around?
Ooh. I mean, AT&T's not really innovating.
They're not innovating.
Yeah.
So my thesis is that I think a company should die when they exist only because of what they have and not because of what they do.
I like that.
Okay. So if we look at this like rough thesis with AT&T, for example, would you buy internet off them if you had, say, Sonic, for example, which actually I should note uses AT&T's infrastructure. But if you had a choice between AT&T and Sonic, I know that.
Oh yeah, I would pick Sonic every day. Sonic is amazing.
It's cheaper, it's faster. You just go online and sign up. I didn't have to call anyone and talk to them for an hour. All sorts, right?
So basically, what's that called? Like the Net Promoter Score or whatever? It's like how people would recommend your product over others, I think. So basically, if you have 0, like people are just picking you, or like, you're in the 25th percentile. I don't know, because there are niche companies. There are still companies today that Kodak is their partner of choice. So like, I don't know. But it's certainly their brand advantage shouldn't last forever.
But Kodak's an interesting one, actually, because Kodak is only sort of dying. It dropped a bunch, obviously, from its peak because it refused to create digital cameras because it was going to cannibalize its film. Right? But now there are both niche uses for actual film, as you were describing.
Right.
And I think these are becoming more and more niche, but there's some things like its HDR, its dynamic range is extremely good, and it's extremely sensitive, and its resolution is insane. And
so the market shrinks. The innovation they had, it's shrinking, but they should still exist.
Yeah,
right?
and they're good at making film. Right?
Yeah.
And we still use film for these niche applications, so that.
And they don't have any unfair advantage at this point. No. Like, brand is always kind of an unfair advantage, but the brand isn't quite the same. So.
Yeah, but I mean, even if it's not like they got, like the thing that Kodak did that killed themselves, but they should have killed them earlier. I wish in a perfect world was they patented the digital camera and then nuked it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had the technology in the 90s. They invented it. They invented the digital camera.
Wow.
And then they said it's going to cannibalize our film business. And so they didn't commercialize it.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if they used that patent to fend off people.
I think it was more of a burying and just hoping no one else reinvented the technology.
Right.
And then obviously they would have the defense, should they? Or maybe someone else had seen the patent and therefore...
So the patent literally expired, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Which is, it's one of those perfect examples of this behemoth delaying the improvement intentionally.
Yeah.
That I think we can all agree that goes in the should be dead bucket.
Open source completely protects against this because you really can't stop innovating for a minute. You can't even. I mean, one of the risks to open source is like you're just not cool enough with the community. Like the community, like people have like a kerfuffle, and then they literally fork because of the kerfuffle.
That happened with MicroPython.
Really?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
What happened there?
The second largest contributor, I think it was, after, I can't remember his name, is a British PhD researcher who created it in the first place. So, huge contributor. I I read the explanation from the creator and their like comment thread, but it was a while ago, so I'll do my best to accurately represent this. But they disagreed on how perhaps polite it was necessary to be with community.
Yeah.
And he said, look, I'm not interested in having your contributions if you're rude, roughly speaking, very, very, very passed down. And he said, well, I've put so much effort into this, which he had, and built so much awesome stuff. So I deserve some control and recognition. And if you're not going to give that to me here, I'm going to take that because I can, and I'm going to do it my own place.
Yep.
And so you end up with a fork.
Yep, absolutely. And this is true of companies too, right? Like, I mean, even with OpenAI, I feel like they all had a pretty good foundation. So you got to figure it's a power and control issue that causes this split up. And, there's no perfect company or project structure for everybody.
No.
And so that kind of
It
means
happened with
it's inevitable.
Aldi. You know Aldi, German supermarket chain? They own Trader Joe's.
Oh, yeah. That happened with them.
Yep. So there's an Aldi North and an Aldi South in Germany.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So Grandpa Aldi started the company, and then his sons inherited it, and there were two sons. And they just disagreed on a whole bunch of stuff. And it's like, again, paraphrasing, basically said, look, we're family. We don't want to fight over all this stuff all the time. You're my brother. I want to be, I want to go to Christmas with you.
Right.
Let's draw a line halfway between all the stores and say, you get the North, I get the South, and let it be.
I do kind of like that. I think about the CEOs of Patagonia and some brand that competes with Patagonia
Black
that's
Diamond.
huge. Yeah. They were like friends.
Yeah.
Right? These CEOs, and they would like go on trips together and stuff like that. So it was just like a respect for the market position, and like it's like a type of competition. I mean, this can also like, this is like ripe ground for collusion, I guess, and stuff like that. But like kind of like a friendly sort of competition can be kind of nice, I guess.
You and I.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you talking about?
Friendly competition.
We have a podcast, but we're all in the open. So collusion usually just means the same feature for both of us, rather
right,
than
right. Exactly.
So it's pretty good collusion.
And ideally, our collusion is more of like we just are, like really. It's like the YC thing where like we're probably not fighting. It's everyone else who's like fighting. If, for example, open solutions, right? They want to keep the closed proprietary. I mean, like one of my biggest fears is I get caught up in one of these patent troll things. Cloudflare just won a huge case against a patent troll and forced them to open all of their patents, right? And I'm like,
yes.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow, we need to have that in the open ecosystem. EFF does this to an extent, but we almost need, specifically for open electronics, we need like an entity that'll like help us because I would pay for insurance against that. It's such a scary thing.
That's so interesting. Is there patent insurance?
I don't know if there's patent insurance.
I've never heard of it. That's such an interesting point.
Yeah. I mean, I think the risk profile, so, for example, I don't know anything about this kind of stuff, but I don't read patents.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? I don't want to risk contamination.
Yeah.
So I don't read patents, right? And I think that means that it might not mean that we're safe, but it at least means I definitely know I didn't copy a patent, right? If you had an insurance thing, you would have to make sure people at those companies aren't reading patents.
And still like ad blocker, but for patent blocker.
Right. But that seems like something I would assume the US government wouldn't love. You're like taking an institution that it sets up and you're saying, we reject your institution. Exactly. So I'm like, I don't know how to win that battle.
I think at this point, I think patents are just regulatory capture, right? Like 20 years in the modern world to commercialize something is an obscene objective.
Oh, it's insane. 20 years.
Bluntly, I actually think it's disgusting.
Yeah.
Because at this point, it's just capture. The last thing we were thinking about patenting is, Narayan, my co-founder, partner at Atopile, he came up with some ingenious way to filter... I won't get into it, but he came up with something ingenious and just like trivial to build. And, it's something that Formlabs, the printing company, might like.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe you slap a patent on it and we can say, hey, we'll give it to you, but we want a free printer. Just because like patenting something now, the price has just plummeted, right? So it used to cost thousands of dollars to get a patent because you had to pay for the lawyers. Their actual filing costs are only about $100.
Oh, huh.
Guess what? LLMs are bloody good at.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I've been through the patent process a couple of times now, and historically, I've found it really hard to find a good patent attorney. I've been through 5 of them and I found one.
Wow.
And yeah, and this was on a court of other companies and whatnot. So they were going through this with me and funding the process. But God, were the fees high for all of these attorneys, and you finally get a good one. And by that guy, all you're doing is explaining your own design to them. And by even going through it with the less good ones, you learn enough about how patents work that you basically write it out in this weird sort of legalese.
Right.
And he looked at it and said, "This is great. I'll shuffle a couple of things around and then you're done. Like this is actually very good."
Right.
And so I'm pretty confident now that I can at least do a good enough job with an LLM and myself between what I already know, and it's good enough to get me a printer.
Yeah, no, true. That's pretty interesting. The thing I wonder about patents, because some companies like Tesla has filed defensive patents, and I'm like, if you're open source, I don't think you need to do a defensive patent. Like if you're selling the IP or using the patent for something like getting free printers, then that's good. But like since like everything we publish is basically just immediately becomes prior art, right? So I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer.
Prior art's a bit of a weird one because it should protect us more than it seems to in practice. So just observationally, for example, I've seen bicycle gear trains, right, that have been replicated on someone's, raw HTML 2006 level website, and he's, made a sketch, built a prototype, videoed the process on a VHS kind of deal. Like there is prior art there, and somehow they still ended up with the patent. So either the researchers suck, or it's just like it doesn't seem to really matter.
So there's still a reason to do it because it shows that. I think it's not in the database unless you do a patent. That's my hunch. Like it would be proven in court.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's it.
And that's going to cost you some money, and the trolls will get you there.
Well, perhaps, but actually, if the trolls failed to do their research, I wonder, actually, I've got no idea in this case, but I wonder if you couldn't basically sue them for the damages for having just like blatantly under-researched the problem space and attacked you in a troll-like fashion. Do you know actually what happened with CloudFlare?
Well, CloudFlare was definitely attacked. They didn't they weren't on the offensive, they were on the defensive.
Yes.
They did a project. I'm probably going to get the name of the project wrong. I won't say it, but but they had a project where anybody was allowed to submit prior art. Okay. They opened it up to the public. They said, "Hey, this is what we're doing. If you don't have any prior art, send it to us." And then they overwhelmingly won. And then they like countersued because this had gone on 2 years, and so they were like, "All right, we're gonna sue you guys for all the damages and all of this." And they made it a really big deal. They like applied this very offensive tactic. Yeah. And they said, "You can get out of this, but you have to open up all your. You will never troll again. Yeah. Right. You have to open up all your patents." So that's my understanding of the situation.
We won't take that like potentially tens of millions of dollars off you.
That's right.
And bankrupt you if you open it all.
That's right.
Wow, that's so cool.
If you stop. So the opposing company, I believe they paid about $200,000 and opened up all their patents.
Wow. Do you know Cloudflare's CEO's name? Matthew something.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it, but he's a great guy from what I've seen.
He's a great guy. I met him on a ski lift in Utah once.
You're kidding.
This is a funny diagnostic story. So I was sitting on the ski lift. It was just me and this one other bloke, obviously dripped out and couldn't just see nothing but each other's mouths. Right. And we were just having a chat. How's your ski day? Oh, the powder's good. Here, I was over here having fun. How's your board? Which skis do you run? Bloody blah. And we're about maybe 30 seconds from the end. He goes, "Oh, what do you do for work?" I recently started a company, or was at this time was working on the open source project. It was before the company.
Right.
And oh, cool. Yeah. What do you do? This and blah, blah, blah. What do you do? And he goes, "Oh, I'm, the head of, I started this company. It's called CloudFlare." And he'd earlier on the ski lift, he'd invited himself over for dinner because he'd asked what we're having. I said, "Pasta." And he's like, "Oh, I could come over and bring a bottle of wine." And I sort of laughed and, "Oh, yeah, sure. Like, love to kind of deal," but we never did anything about it. And I was getting off this lift and I thought, I should have given him my number.
Yeah, right? Oh my gosh.
Anyway, super cool dude.
That's awesome.
Fun guy.
He's in a pretty good place, I think, in terms of fame. Like, I don't think that many people. I probably wouldn't recognize his face.
No.
But he kind of has a lot of prestige and respect online. He's straddling that great point of popularity. Yeah. Mark Zuckerberg can't walk on the street.
Yeah.
Or Elon or whatever. But But yeah, he's straddling that great place.
He's doing well.
One other thing on the open source licenses, through this Pear AI debacle, I learned about something from somebody who works at Sentry.
Okay.
They were talking about this license called the FPL, functional something.
Okay.
Functional license. But it's a license that Sentry uses, and it delays and then goes to MIT, or delays and then goes to Apache too.
Yep.
And so it's exactly what we're talking about, right? Like you are given the torch for some amount of time, 6 months, 12 months, a year, whatever.
Yep.
And then you lose it and people can build off it. So I thought that license is great, and probably a lot more people should use this, because they're, especially in the hardware world, there's so many things trapped in GPL, and I'm like
what is this? Yeah.
Can't use it.
Yes, I know the license class you're talking about. I also researched them, and I think there's one also a business source license.
Yeah, BSL. Yeah.
Broken out of this general niche of trying to figure out how you can create a company around it. It's a business source, and then there's these time delayed to Apache or to something. Yeah. And there's, I want to say, it's not CockroachDB. There's one of the big database companies that actually has switched to using one of them as well. How long do you think it should be? How long do you get? 2 years?
So if we were to adopt it, and I think we would if somebody came out with JS circuit and started if they were taking that angle, then we would start doing some stuff.
Yeah.
But I think companies should usually have 1, 6, and 12. Okay. And they should apply it in different places.
Yep.
And generally you start with 1
year or month.
Okay. 12 years. Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, so it depends. If you're a drug company, then the cycle
that
is
makes
actually
a lot more
long,
sense.
right?
Yeah.
Just not everything should be that.
Yeah. Definitely depends on development time. Yeah. But, usually if you're going over a year, so much changes. Like, it's just crazy in software anyway.
Yeah.
Drugs, I don't know anything about drugs. But in software, I'm like, code written a year ago, like, it might, honestly, even like Node.js code written a year ago, sometimes I have trouble running it. There's that many changes.
Yeah.
So
it's a fast-moving world.
Yeah.
Seve, thank you so much. Fantastic conversation as always.
Good talking to you. All right.